Hi guys, thank you for joining in today. Today's topic is going to be very interesting because it's one of the most offbeat topic talked about. Many businesses in India right now think of ESG just as optional, something they would adopt it once they are funded or the regulation comes over it. But what actually founders of mid-cap companies are not understanding that ESG has already been adopted. Funders and investors are actually looking at how they're ESG compliant, how they adopt it, and how they are succeeding. Today's conversation is not about ticking box of ESG. It's actually about understanding from an expert on how ESG is actually adopted, how consumers are actually perceiving ESG, and how business actually overcomplicate this small phenomena. So with me right now I have Pranav. Hi Pranav.
Hello.
Thank you for joining in and giving your valuable time. So I think today's discussion is more about on your specific field and seeing how we are evolving in terms of sustainability, in terms of being a very conscious consumer. Your insight today would be more beneficial in terms of consumers, mid cap companies and MSMEs as well.
Right. Happy to be here, Shailesh.
Thank you. So, Pranav, let's go on the first dig in before we jump into the whole universe of ESG. What is actually ESG and how is actually it creating an urgency right now in India?
I think it's in this age, companies are not valued just basis their financial performance.
Yeah,
We have information at the click of a button, and the way companies are being perceived, a conscious consumer wants to understand what is the vision of any legal entity, whether it is a MSME or a small scale or mid cap, large cap. What is it that they are contributing beyond just the financial value? So ESG stands for environmental social governance.
yeah,
It is essentially a framework which guides companies to identify uh, and prioritize what are those aspects under the three dimensions of environment, social, governance that are important for not just the company but for all its stakeholders, right? And I use the term stakeholder because we are not just talking about shareholders
correct.
now, right? So stakeholders,
The
the
consumer becomes a stakeholder.
exactly the universe is beyond just the shareholder. So ESG, simply put, is a framework that helps you identify, assess a company's performance across the three dimensions of environment, social, and governance. Environment covering topics like climate change. I think everybody is witnessing impacts of climate change
As we speak.
as we speak. Water stewardship. You must be knowing India is now moving towards a water scarce nation,
Yeah.
not the kind of impression we would want to create for ourselves and for the world. Social covers things like your customer satisfaction, safety, customer safety when they're using a product that has been manufactured by somebody. Governance covers topics like anti-bribery mechanisms, representation of gender in the board composition, and how well you manage things like whistleblower. So essentially, across these three dimensions, ESG is a very structured approach to understanding a company's performance beyond just their financial performance.
And how do you think it's creating an urgency in India right now?
So there are various factors that urge companies to improve their performance towards ESG. The most prominent, I would say, is the fr- uh, the regulatory forces. So we've had emission standards since 1970s. Industries are not allowed to pollute the neighboring, say, water bodies beyond a certain limit, or emit air pollutants, beyond a certain limit. So nodal regulatory agencies make sure that companies adhere to these
Norms.
norms, and they vary depending on the sector, as well. Other regulatory elements that are pushing now beyond just these emission norms, something, for example, by the SEBI, we have BRSR, or Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting, which has mandated the top 1,000 listed companies by market cap to report on some of these ESG parameters. Interestingly, they have also mandated assurance on the quantities or on the numbers that are being reported. So this brings in the element of transparency and confidence that companies can like no longer greenwash and just make claims, right? They have to be backed by numbers, scientifically governed, and also validated by someone else. So BRSR has been an important driver for ESG related reporting. And reporting only happens when you actually do something, right? That is when you have something to report on. So year on year, companies are improving their reporting practices. The push has come from SEBI, again, a regulator. So these are regulatory aspects. Another very interesting driver for sustainability in Indian companies is the market. So more mature markets like Europe, they have mandated through certain mechanisms like carbon border adjustment mechanism or CBAM, which are pushing the exporters in India to decarbonize or reduce their greenhouse gas emissions from their operations. Otherwise, they have to pay a certain tax
Fine of it, yeah.
fine, right? And just to bring things in perspective, 27% of India's export, which is closely valued at $8.2 billion, is under threat. I'm talking about like the steel, aluminium, iron, these sectors, they are under the CBAM mechanism. So that is the amount which is under the purview of CBAM.
Massive.
तो आप अगर इसको इम्प्रूव नहीं करोगे ईयर ऑन ईयर, आपका फाइन भी बढ़ता चला जाएगा. It is going to, by the way, roll out in January of 2026. So we're already there.
Yeah.
Right? So companies that will not adhere to these guidelines will fail to be competitive in markets like Europe.
That's a great, interesting insight you gave us, right? But when I speak to founders or let's say companies, I get the sense that they are just doing ESG just as a compliance box. They're not actually making an impact. And most founders have come up saying that we are also not aware of what actually on ground needs to be done. So
Right.
Just throw some light on that.
Right. I think I would have to agree with that sentiment that ESG is perceived like a checkbox item in most companies, especially I would say mid-cap companies, even in the top 1,000 listed entities. ESG is being driven through the office of company secretary because they look at all the regulatory norms, right? Or if there's an impact fund which is investing in some of these startups, they would also mandate certain reporting items. So companies, obviously, to comply with either regulatory norms or the expectations of funders, they end up reporting numbers as a year-on-year activity. But by doing this, they're not really building their own capability. And so there's always a reliance on a third-party advisor or a consultant, right? I'm being a consultant myself. Maybe I should not be making this statement, but you are not really building your own capability if you are considering this as a checklist or a compliance-driven activity. Now, often what happens, as I said, ESG is a framework to identify areas for improvement, right? Now, it's obvious that if you are a more energy efficient company, you will end up saving costs, right? So ESG it's an opportunity for you to minimize your costs as well while building a reputation, a brand for yourself. Now, what happens is if you comply with all the norms that are there, which is again driven by the company secretary's office, right? You are a company. You will be registered as a company because you're complying with but you will not be a brand. To build a brand, you leverage ESG because a company, I mean, there have been cases, right, where certain large FMCG players were banned from certain states because they were extracting too much
Yeah.
groundwater. So you've lost a particular market.
And you lost the
share.
opportunity to capture that market, basically.
Exactly. And even if you are still thriving, you need to have a more rounded approach, taking in perceptions from your board, from your manufacturing facilities, from your suppliers, from the communities where your factories are located. Only then you can truly achieve the impact that ESG can deliver for a company. And as I said, if it is compliance driven, it is mostly driven through the corporate office.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they are away from the hard reality of what is happening on ground.
On ground.
Yeah. So I think that's my take on why ESG should not be a compliance driven aspect. Yeah.
That's great. I think it brings a lot of value in terms of what should be on ground versus what's happening in reality at the corporate office.
Right.
Can you share an example of where you have failed an industry or a company which has failed in materiality?
Okay. Let's understand what materiality is first, right? Materiality is, when I say this particular topic within the environmental pillar is material for me, it means that I will have dedicated resources, I will set certain targets, I will have a vision to address that aspect of one of these three pillars, right? So, for instance, climate change.
Yeah.
Every company that's out there, you can pick up any report, you can pick up any social media post. Obviously, climate change is a highly material topic, right? No company is going to say that, oh, material, it's not an important topic for me.
That is the most critical one.
It is one of the most critical ones. But are companies able to realize that? Right? Again, it being a checklist item, because your reports and your investors and say SEBI, they want you to talk about materiality. So you end up, mentioning some of the things which your peers are also doing, right? And again, driven through compliance forces. What happens is when you talk about a material topic for a company, are you bringing in the company's perspective? वो नहीं होता बॉस. अब क्लाइमेट चेंज मेरी पर्टिकुलर कंपनी को कैसे इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है, मेरे सप्लायर्स को कैसे इम्पैक्ट कर रहा है. आर माई सप्लायर्स, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, बेस्ड in an area where there are some regulations that are going to shut them off or move them because of climate change or water scarcity. ये डिसीजन अगर आप ब्रिंग नहीं करोगे अपने in your strategic approach, you will miss out, and then it becomes a business risk, right? So materiality कहने का मतलब कौन से ऐसे टॉपिक्स हैं जो मेरे लिए क्रिटिकल हैं, जिसके लिए मुझे फंड्स allocate करने पड़ेंगे. I have to maybe build capacity of my different divisions like procurement, like HR or utilities department, so that I am able to stay ahead of the curve, or at least not be a lagger. So there are various examples where companies failed to really identify materiality, and now they're facing backlash. For example, one of the largest airlines operators, right? They could not adhere to some of the guidelines provided by a country's civil aviation, and a consequence of that was customer backlash. And if you look at their reports, they will talk about customer satisfaction and employee well-being and employee as like, this is a highly material topic. But the ground reality is very different. आप कोई भी न्यूज़ चैनल खोल के देखो आज की तारीख में, you will see customers lashing out at the ground stuff.
Yeah. I'm getting very aggressive.
And getting very aggressive.
And it's a human-to-human interaction.
Exactly.
But since it's so aggravated,
Yeah.
And he's rightly pointed out that, how critical that topic became. It's just not on the books.
Yeah.
On ground, how it is getting implemented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, another interesting case example is of a beauty and wellness brand which claimed to be toxin free. They are toxin free and they were plastic positive, right? They're making these statements. And because of this kind of a placement, right, branding, you could say, they became a unicorn in 6 years, right? It's a fantastic story. But then when they approached their IPO, closer to their IPO, a lot of people then scrutinized. They read the red herring documents and did their own independent research. Turns out the ingredients that they were using were not really toxin free as per US FDA and other agencies. Now they did have a launch, but the trust that they had built was breached. There was and definitely some of the market players changed, because when you make big statements and you don't back it up because you haven't done thorough research for yourself and for your products, that's the kind of backlash you will face. तो ये सब, these are some of the examples where materiality सिर्फ करने के लिए नहीं होनी चाहिए. आपको हर material topic का अपने सारे stakeholders में कहाँ risk है, कहाँ opportunity है, you have to understand that. And the ground reality is, materiality assessment was, I've seen, एक घंटे की online call पे decide हो जाता है कि ये material topics हैं हमारे. Can you believe it? That is how it is happening. And year on year आप वही narrative रखते हो generic, और अब उसी पे ही तो क्या है इसमें, ये टॉपिक्स आपने बोर्ड को प्रेजेंट नहीं करे, ये टॉपिक्स आपने अपने इन्वेस्टर्स को लूप इन करके नहीं करे, आपने कर दिया बिकॉज इट इज अ कंप्लायंस रिलेटेड और चेक बॉक्स आइटम. बट दैट इज द रेप्यूटेशनल रिस्क of not doing this as a strategic and as a structured manner.
Fair enough. Fair play. Great. We talked about stakeholders a lot, right? And in my perspective as well, in the largest stakeholder is the consumer, right, in the market, because they are your voice, face, anything. So how do you think consumers in the current situation are perceiving ESG, and what are they expecting out of companies in terms of ESG?
Right. I think we already touched upon this a bit, that consumers now are becoming more and more conscious because they are living in a world where air quality is poor, water quality is poor, and they want that the products that they use should have minimum, I wouldn't say zero, but would have minimum impact on the environment. It is not on the behest of child labor or poor governance. Consumers want to use more conscious and eco-friendly, violation-free products. So that push has happened. In more mature markets like Europe, Australia, they have urged using products that are certified by a third party. Like if you are making a claim that we are plastic free, or we are using a more sustainable raw material, they want this to be backed by a board, somebody who's authorizing whether this is actually safe to use or hai bhi ki nahi hai. So if you see the market spending scenario currently, and also projected to 2035, majority of the spending is going to come from individuals who we now call as Gen Z, right? To the point that by 2035, their annual spendings are projected to be of the order $2 trillion.
Massive amount.
Yeah.
2 trillion.
And that's going to be like nearly 46%. So almost half
of it
is coming from a generation which no longer looks at products the way millennials looked or the boomer population looked. They are willing to, a lot of research, these market studies suggest that they are willing to pay a premium if they are guaranteed कि ये product eco-friendly है, right? More than 80% in these studies, more than 80% of the Gen Z population wants to stay away from products जिनकी green washing होती है, कि आप कुछ claim कर रहे हो लेकिन हो नहीं, right? They are I'm going to use a Gen Z term, but they are willing to diss the product if it is not what it claims to be. So the way people are perceiving products, that's changing, right? And if you do not include these aspects, right, when you are talking, when you're doing customer studies, अगर आप उनसे सस्टेनेबिलिटी के रिलेटेड अपने कंज्यूमर से एक्चुअल परसेप्शन लेके बिजनेस स्ट्रैटेजी में इंटीग्रेट नहीं करोगे, then you will lose out. Then you will become a legacy brand which is phasing out. And many companies are actually in India are facing that challenge. There is a there's a new kid on the block, which is a more conscious, a more socially conscious, environmentally friendly company, and they are getting traction by the Indian consumers. और आप देखो अब मेजॉरिटी क्या है, इंस्टाग्राम से चीज़ें खरीदी जा रही हैं, राइट? सो व्हाट डज दैट इंडिकेट कि ट्रेंड्स जब बन जाते हैं, सो पीपल आर फॉलोइंग ट्रेंड्स rather than brand loyalty.
True.
Right? So we have to be very mindful of the changing consumption pattern, and companies now, again, because consumer तो आपका main one of the important stakeholders है, right? अगर आप उसके perceptions को capture नहीं करेंगे, then you will miss out. So that's what I feel.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I think it's Gen Z who is going to drive the next wave.
Yeah, definitely.
In your opinion, what company, give me top 3 points what companies should do differently in the space of ESG just to stand out.
I think they need to look at ESG, as I said, beyond compliance. What they practically need to do is they need representation when they're starting on an ESG journey, or they're at some point updating certain strategies, their policies. They should, rather than rushing in, think of it from a long-term horizon, right? Don't claim topics of importance or material topics क्योंकि आपके peers भी कर रहे हैं. रखो उसे as a reference, but contextualize it for your company. Get representation from board, get representation from all the important departments, और सबके opinions को लेकर आप company specific narrative develop करो. And for each material topic that you roll out, make sure you have a structured risk management framework. Enterprise risk management होता है, इसमें हम generally financial चीज़ों को हम लोग रखते हैं. Bring in ESG and sustainability metrics into an enterprise risk management framework. तो उससे क्या होगा ना, quarter to quarter जब board meetings होंगी, there is then an accountability. Discussions होंगे. Representation, special committee की representation होनी चाहिए board में, क्योंकि वही ESG में सब third जो often neglected element है वो governance है.
Yeah.
Right? Like India में भी आप देखो 60% board members हैं in the top 1000 listed who are formally ESG. So even here there is not 100%. तो अब आप सोचो 1000 से भी जो छोटी कंपनियां हैं उसमें कितना होगा, right? So this is one, that your approach towards ESG should be more comprehensive, should be beyond compliance, should be in a timely manner, not in a rushed way. Long term सोच के आप चलिए, because ESG के जो challenges हैं वो long term realize होंगे, तो आपको वो अपना vision alignment time horizons का करना पड़ेगा, right? Second is the consumer is smarter now. तो आप green washing नहीं कर सकते हैं, otherwise you will lose out. There are too many players in the market. कुछ sectors हैं जहाँ पे monopoly, duopoly है, sure, they can still, you can be rest assured उतना नहीं होगा challenge. लेकिन जहाँ duopoly से ज़्यादा का scene है, वहाँ any backlash from the customer can ruin your and ESG are some of the major reasons why companies face reputational backlash. Yeah. So I think these are some points which I feel companies should keep in mind when they are addressing ESG. And the third point, which is very important, while there is a vision, there is an intention. Unless you have funds to implement, ESG will not. And you need to recalculate the way you look at ROI. है ना, ROI सिर्फ फाइनेंस के टर्म्स में ही नहीं होता है. ROI और भी बहुत ब्रांडिंग में भी होता है, आपकी ब्रांड लॉयल्टी, इन सारी चीज़ों में भी होता है. तो कहीं ना कहीं आपने प्रायोरिटाइजेशन कर ली, टाइम होराइजन सब फिक्स कर लिया, लेकिन उसको बैक करने के लिए फाइनेंसेस चाहिए. दैट इज वाई कंपनीज दैट हैव CFO or finance department's representation in the ESG strategy end up achieving both profit and purpose at the same time.
That's amazingly put on.
Yeah.
So, Pranav, that's a very interesting discussion we have. Thank you for your time. And I hope anyone who is watching this right now gets to understand that, ESG is just not a checkbox.
Yeah.
It's to do more with what you're doing on ground. It helps you bring your brand, it helps you bring loyalty, and also gives an impact on socially what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shailesh, for having me here. And it was wonderful chit-chatting about this often neglected topic. Yeah.
Great.